President Obama, this came out 6/3/2015. Okay, I like something up to date. President Obama is a traitor to the black race. It's open letter. Talk. First black president, the first black U.S. president perpetuates the modern day slavery of mass black incarceration and spouses like Rush Limbaugh and allegiance to America exceptionalism, refuses to pardon U.S. political prisoners, makes war on Africa, has spent 2 terms in office serving the interests of corporations. If that be the case, then why elect a black man or a black woman president? Barack Obama is a traitor to the black race. Open letter by David Ruffin Jr. I condemn him for his charades and pretending to be concerned about the plight of black people and the poor. The reason I suggested to my colleagues in the National Black Conference of Black Lawyers that as President of the United States, President Barack Obama proved to be a hypocrite and a low-life, handkerchief head politician. When I characterized President Obama in this fashion, 2 colleagues, attorney Ron Isaac and Atajumi Sankufu, reprimanded me, saying that I could not resort to name calling in that, in my respect, President Barack Obama's work as president improved the lives of black people and many others. A third colleague, attorney, sound like my boy at the barbershop. A third colleague, attorney Terry Price, asked me to explain my reasons for my ugly opinion regarding the president. In my response, I expressed appreciation for the moral courage with which Ajumu and Ron responded to my criticism of Obama. In my view, their reprimands exhibited their heartfelt love and respect for others, including President Barack Obama. Similarly, I made clear that I humbly respected the question posed by attorney Terry Price that questioned me why I was such ugly about the president. With that, I said I want to be perfectly clear that this published statement about the president, like a black person selling dangerous and addictive narcotics to his or her neighborhood, like a black person robbing or murdering black people, and like Clarence Pendleton, now deceased, Justice Clarence Thomas and Armstrong Williams, President Barack Obama is a traitor to his race. Indeed, while he carries on business of the United States with poise and confidence, President Obama holds himself out during the lame duck period of his presidency as though he worked assiduously over the last 6.5 years to uplift black people and the poor. That pretense on the part of the president is hypocritical and, in my view, unexcusable. To be sure, the present administration deliberately conducted itself over the first 6.5 years as though President Obama owed no obligation, moral or otherwise, to black people. He did, that's true.
Yeah, that's true.
And to other oppressed people. That would be any different from the obligations owed by one of Obama's white predecessors. In other words, President Obama considered himself identical with John Kennedy, Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, and George Bush. When it comes to Obama's political and moral obligation as president, if that be the case, then why elect a black man or a black woman? What he's saying is, if you're going to do the same thing,
might well the white man.
Every other motherfucker going to do it in there,
white man.
and really not going to look at your own race of people and try to do something, then why elect you?
Yeah, why elect you?
Why you coming in at black? You should come in, at least something he said, under Bush and Obama.
He snuck in there.
Look, he said, under Bush and Obama, the British-American policy of regime change in Zimbabwe aimed to benefit white capital. To be sure, President Obama worked since his election in 2008 for several noteworthy causes. The reinforcement and the greater enrichment of the billionaires and the multinational financial institutions on Wall Street. You know, he bailed out Wall Street, he bailed out the car industry, on those corporations. And he said the furtherance of President George W. Bush effort to conquer, directly or indirectly, vast petroleum reserves and vast natural gas reserves and major water routes in and around northern Africa and West Africa, and protection and the empowerment of the racially bigoted and genocidal state of Israel, the political enslavement and hence the cultural economic genocide of Palestinian people. 5, the enrichment of U.S. health insurers and U.S. pharmaceutical companies. And 6, the modernization of the racially bigoted status quo in the U.S. policy states and its imperialism military regime. Under President Obama, the United States, along with the United Kingdom, targeted Zimbabwe for regime change. When Obama pursued this course against Zimbabwe, he followed the policy adopted by Prime Minister Tony Blair, endorsed by President George W. Bush. Under Bush and Obama, the British-American policy regime in Zimbabwe aimed to benefit white capital that invested extraordinary sums of money in 1980 in Ian Smith's racially bigoted Rhodesian police state. Hence, President Obama supported in 2009 the United Kingdom. You gotta understand now, the Queen still rules shit. America still owned by the Queen and the British monarchy. It's a corporation, America's corporation. Willing to buy and sell program which enabled the black majority in Zimbabwe to buy their land from the racist white minority who, before the end of Zimbabwe Civil War 19, owned almost all of the arable and mineral-rich land in Zimbabwe. That's amen. Mm-hmm. The willing buyer, willing seller program resulted from a peace treaty negotiated in September 1999. Zimbabwe. President Obama supported the white capitalist function, strove to disgorge sovereign power over the national regime in Zimbabwe. Obama, like Tony Blair before him, Labour President Mugabe, a tyrant. In fact, the United States and Britain simply wanted to displace Mugabe's protective nationalist state and maintain exclusive white capitalism dominion over the large tracts of the arable Zimbabwe land. In fact, President Obama stood for other injustices against formerly colonized people. For example, under President Obama, the United States completed George Bush's conquest of Iraq and Afghanistan, while also furthering U.S. military incursions into Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, and Syria. Under President Obama, the United States organized an insidiously bigoted embargo against the economy of Iran so as to crush its research and investment in nuclear energy. This happened while the United States protected Israel's nuclear armaments, which posed a genocidal threat to Arab people in Southwest Asia, to African and Arab people in Northern Africa. Under President Obama, the United States imposed extraordinary political and economic pressure against Venezuelan people's experiment with economic egalitarianism. Egalitarianism against the Cuban people experiment with moral conscious socialism, against the Iran people experiment with revolutionary, the Shiites nationalism, and with Colombia's people rebellion under tyranny. Under Obama, the United States completed George Bush's conquest of Afghanistan. And boy, that's powerful. As the president worked here in the United States, I'm displeased with his determined effort to ignore the fundamental needs of black people and the poor. During Obama's presidency, the racially bigoted American police state murdered scores of unarmed black men, women, and children, with many of these atrocities recorded on video cameras for the world to see. Moreover, during Obama's presidency, white vigilante murder of black people, whether pretending to be legitimate as the heinous murder February 2012 of Trayvon Martin, or whether the brazenly illegal as the slaughterless the 10 days ago of 9 AME parishioners in a church in Charleston. South Carolina became the new blood sport. In fact, white police and sometimes black police appear to be hunting for an opportunity to kill unarmed black people. Meanwhile, few white civilians find a delusional need to defend themselves with deadly force against unarmed black people who happen to be walking home from a convenience store, Trayvon Martin, who happen to be at church studying Bible, their mother Emmanuel 9, who seeks neighborly assistance after a car accident. 19-year-old Renisha McBride died outside Detroit, 2000 gunshot wound. Yeah, you're not gonna do the door tonight in a white neighborhood. You could get killed. That's what happened to her.
That's with that color.
In essence, white nationalism posts today a new form of legalized lynching as a counterpoint. President Obama responds with nothing of material significance except to eulogize the 9 unwitting martyrs' deaths during a national televised funeral. He gonna do that because that was propaganda and publicity for him.
Yeah.
He didn't mean no Amazing Grace song, this sitting up singing that song. Like all you, including Jume, Ron, and Terry. I understand that we, as a black people, live under a racial bigoted regime of white capital supremacy, a genocidal regime of enormous power that involves for its benefit but never disintegrates its own accord. However, after scores of black men were tortured in Chicago by white police, tortured black men for more than 2 decades with impunity, while Barack Obama represents many of these black men in the Illinois State Senate, and while thousands of black people today live in prison, with many facing execution to crimes they never committed, or after being convicted in racially bigoted tribunals that President Obama never condemned, we make a horrible mistake by excusing Obama for failing at a job he volunteered to do, and that is to enforce the constitutional precepts of equal protection of law for all people, including black people, poor people, not just to benefit the rich and the privileged white constituency, which he's done a good job of. In my view, and even white people think he's a piece of shit too, because of these violated Constitution. In my view, we make a horrible mistake by accepting from Obama his uniquely gifted form of tokenism, while he gives the power of the U.S. presidency to tyrannical regimes in Saudi Arabia and Israel, to capitalist elites who benefit from court-ordered injunctions against occupiers, and the state prisons where black men make up a disproportionate number of those on death row and otherwise incarcerated. During most of the first 2 years as president, Obama fought mightily for health case reform, enriched health care insurance, multi-pharmaceutical companies, and during that period he also bailed out billionaires and their agents on Wall Street, including opportunist Maurice Hank Greenberg, AIG. Moreover, the president's first years, he offered showcase and expansion of U.S. military dominion over much of Southwest Asia, Northern Africa. I referred to these achievements earlier. I reinstate them here for a reason. During most of Obama's first 2 years in office, he enjoyed the benefit of filibustering proof majority of the U.S. Senate, while also enjoying the benefit of legislative majority in the U.S. House of Representatives. With these majorities, Obama could have mobilized a substantial reform of federal sentencing and habeas corpus. The majority could have been legislative immigration reform so as to protect immigrants from unjust deportation. In fact, with his congressional majority during his first 2 years in office, President Obama could have pushed effectively for legislation relief for historically black colleges and universities, to establish a long-term program to uplift a black nation, both in the United States and abroad. Man, this is another black man that's just breaking down shit